The Cat Behind the Bakery. Chapter 1: The Corner of the Fence. The cat sat in the back corner behind Elm Street Bakery every afternoon. It was a quiet space where the wooden fence met the brick wall. Small patches of weeds grew between the cracks in the concrete. The cat had gray fur with subtle stripes that darkened near her tail. She was neither large nor small. Her eyes were a common shade of amber that caught the late afternoon light. The bakery staff closed up around the same time each day. First, the back door would open, and someone would take out the trash. The bags made a soft thud as they landed in the dumpster. Sometimes crumbs fell from the bags. The cat watched but did not approach, even when bits of bread or pastry landed near enough to reach. Traffic on Elm Street slowed as the workday ended. The sounds of car engines faded into occasional passers-by. Birds settled into the single maple tree that grew beside the parking lot. Shadows lengthened across the pavement. The temperature dropped a few degrees. None of these changes seemed to affect the cat, who remained in her chosen spot. The bakery windows darkened one by one. Inside, someone swept the floor. The movement was visible through the kitchen window, a steady back-and-forth motion. The sound of the broom didn't carry to where the cat sat. A light in the back office stayed on longer than the others. Eventually it too went out. Wind moved through the alley, stirring small bits of paper and leaves. The cat's fur ruffled slightly, but she made no effort to groom or adjust her position. Her tail remained curled neatly around her front paws. Her ears turned occasionally toward small sounds, a distant car door, the click of the bakery's back door lock, the rustle of the maple tree's leaves. Stars appeared gradually, though only the brightest were visible against the town's lights. The cat's eyes reflected a street lamp that came on at the end of the alley. Moths began to circle the light. The cat watched them without particular interest. Her breathing was slow and even. The night air grew cooler. Dew formed on the metal surfaces of the dumpster and on the leaves of the weeds. The cat's fur remained dry. She sat slightly elevated on a concrete block that had once been part of a small set of steps. The steps no longer led anywhere. The door they had once accessed had been bricked over years ago. Most businesses on the street had closed for the night. Occasionally people walked past the entrance to the alley. They rarely looked in the direction of the cat. When they did, they saw only a gray shape, motionless and unremarkable. No one entered the alley after dark. Night settled fully over the town. The noises changed to the sounds of evening, distant televisions, an occasional laugh from an open window, the hum of air conditioning units. The cat remained in her spot, neither sleeping deeply nor fully alert. Her eyes closed for periods of time, then opened without apparent reason. The bakery remained dark and quiet. Nothing moved behind its windows. The only light came from a small security bulb above the back door. It cast a pale circle that didn't quite reach the corner where the cat sat. The boundary between light and shadow remained fixed throughout the night. Midnight passed. The cat changed position only once, turning slightly to face the opposite direction. The movement was unhurried. Her new position gave her a view of the street beyond the alley entrance. Few cars passed at this hour. Those that did moved slowly, their headlights briefly illuminating the walls of the alley before continuing on. The temperature continued to drop until it reached the coolest point of the night. The cat's breath became visible as small clouds that quickly dissipated. Her fur had thickened slightly with the approach of autumn. She showed no signs of discomfort in the cool air. Pre-dawn arrived with a gradual lightening of the sky. Stars faded. Birds began to stir in the maple tree. The cat remained in place, as if the changing of night to day was of no consequence. Her eyes reflected the growing light. Her position remained the same as it had been for hours. Chapter 2: The Early Mornings. Dawn at the bakery began long before customers arrived. The first sign of activity came at 4:30 a.m. when a small white van parked beside the back door. The driver, a man in his 50s wearing a cap, carried 3 crates of milk and eggs inside. He nodded to the cat as if they were old acquaintances, though she made no response. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Lights came on throughout the bakery. First the kitchen, then the front display area, finally the small office in the back. Shadows moved across the windows as the early staff began their work. The smell of baking bread drifted into the alley. It was a warm, yeasty scent that grew stronger as the morning progressed. The cat was already in her usual place. If she had left during the night, she had returned before the first baker arrived. Her position was almost identical each morning, sitting upright, tail curled around her front paws, eyes half closed but watchful. The increasing activity around her seemed to neither interest nor disturb her. At 5:45 a.m., the flour delivery arrived. A larger truck backed carefully into the alley. The driver unloaded 6 large sacks onto a hand truck and wheeled them inside. The back door remained open longer this time. Voices and the sound of machinery drifted out. The cat's ears turned toward the noise, but she didn't move from her spot. Morning light gradually filled the alley. It reached the cat last, as her corner remained in shadow until the sun cleared the buildings across the street. When the light finally touched her, her gray fur took on a warmer tone. Her eyes narrowed slightly against the brightness but remained open. Birds moved through the alley, looking for crumbs. They hopped close to the bakery's back door, where bits of dough and sugar sometimes fell. They kept their distance from the cat, though she showed no interest in them. Their quick movements contrasted with her stillness. Their calls to each other were the loudest sounds in the alley. By 7 a.m., customers began to arrive at the front of the bakery. Cars pulled into the small parking lot. Doors opened and closed. Voices called greetings. None of this activity was visible from the cat's position, but the sounds carried clearly. The rhythm of commerce established itself, the bell on the front door, the cash register, the murmur of conversations. A bakery worker came out to sweep the back step. He was young, perhaps still in high school, wearing the green apron that all the staff wore. He glanced at the cat without surprise. His broom didn't approach her corner. The dust and crumbs he swept went into a small pile that he then scooped into the dumpster. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. By mid-morning, the alley warmed considerably. The cat remained in the same spot, though she now sat in full sunlight. Her eyes had closed to thin slits. Her breathing remained slow and measured. A delivery truck for the hardware store next door backed into the alley's entrance, temporarily blocking the light. The cat didn't react to the noise or the change in illumination. Across the alley, a door opened in what had once been a warehouse. A woman emerged carrying a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. She took them to the recycling bin and carefully placed them inside. She glanced at the cat, then at the bakery, as if wondering about the connection between them. She went back inside without approaching either. The morning continued with the steady rhythm of commerce. People came and went. Deliveries were made. The scents from the bakery changed as different items were prepared, first bread, then pastries, finally the lunch items that would be sold later. The cat remained a constant, unmoving presence through it all. At precisely noon, the bakery's back door opened again. A different staff member emerged, this one older with gray hair tied back under a hairnet. She sat on the step and unwrapped a sandwich. She ate quietly, looking occasionally at the cat. She didn't attempt to approach or feed her. When she finished eating, she brushed the crumbs from her lap and went back inside. Chapter 3: A Stretch and a Walk. On the 7th day, the cat moved. The movement began slowly, almost imperceptibly. First, her front paws extended forward, one after the other. Her back arched upward in a gentle curve. Her tail straightened behind her, then relaxed. The entire process took perhaps 30 seconds. It was the first significant movement anyone had seen her make. The cat stood on all fours now. She was lean but not thin. Her legs were of medium length, proportional to her body. She took a step forward, placing each paw deliberately on the concrete. There was no hurry in her movements. She walked as if the destination was of less importance than the act of walking itself. She moved along the edge of the bakery wall, staying close to the brick surface. Her whiskers occasionally brushed against it. The morning sun had warmed the bricks, and perhaps she felt this warmth as she passed. She didn't look back at the corner she had occupied for so long. A bakery worker opened the back door carrying a trash bag. He paused when he saw the cat moving. For a moment they regarded each other, the young man in his green apron, the gray cat in mid-step. Neither seemed startled by the encounter. The worker continued to the dumpster. The cat continued her walk. Their paths didn't cross. At the end of the bakery wall, the cat paused. Ahead lay more open space, the small parking area used by staff. A car pulled in, tires crunching on the gravel. The cat waited until the engine turned off and the driver went inside. Only then did she continue her journey, skirting the edge of the parking area rather than crossing it directly. Her pace remained unhurried. She stopped occasionally, not to rest but seemingly to observe her surroundings more carefully. Her head turned slowly from side to side. Her ears rotated towards small sounds, a bird in the maple tree, the hum of the bakery's ventilation system, distant traffic on Elm Street. She reached a row of garbage bins that belonged to the neighboring businesses. They stood in a neat line against a wooden fence. Between two of the bins was a narrow space, partly sheltered by the fence's overhang. The cat examined this space, sniffing at the ground and the sides of the bins. The space was dry and relatively clean. The ground was concrete, like most of the alley, but here it was free of the small debris that collected elsewhere. The bins provided walls on two sides. The fence provided both a wall and a partial roof. The opening faced away from the prevailing wind. The cat stepped into this space. She turned once in a circle, her tail brushing against the bins. Then she settled into a sitting position similar to the one she had maintained in her previous location. Her front paws tucked neatly beneath her chest. Her tail curled around to touch her side. Her breathing slowed. From this new vantage point, she could still see the bakery's back door. She could also see further down the alley to where it opened onto the side street. People passed by occasionally, most walking quickly, focused on their destinations. None of them noticed the cat watching from between the bins. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows shifted. The cat's new position remained in shade most of the time, protected by the height of the surrounding buildings. The temperature in this spot was slightly cooler than her previous corner. A gentle breeze moved through the narrow space between the bins. The afternoon continued with its normal patterns. Deliveries arrived at various businesses. Staff took breaks at the back doors. A mail carrier walked through with a bag of envelopes and small packages. The cat observed it all from her new location, as still in this spot as she had been in her old one. As evening approached, the bakery began its closing routine. Lights went out one by one. Staff emerged carrying bags and coats. Cars started and drove away. The activity level decreased gradually until the alley returned to its nighttime quiet. The cat remained between the bins, watching the transition from day to night. Chapter 4: The Watcher on the Roof. The small shed behind the bakery had been there for years. It was a simple structure with weathered wooden walls and a slightly sloped metal roof. It housed gardening tools, empty crates, and seasonal decorations. No one used it daily. The door was secured with a simple latch, but it wasn't locked. The roof was approximately 8 feet above the ground at its lowest point. No one saw how the cat got onto the shed roof. She wasn't there when the bakery closed the previous evening. She was there when the first baker arrived at 4:15 a.m. She sat near the center of the roof, close to where it met the bakery's exterior wall. The metal surface had collected dew overnight, but where the cat sat, it was dry. From this elevated position, she could observe the entire alley. She could see into the bakery's parking lot and part of Elm Street beyond. She could see the tops of cars as they passed. She could see birds in the maple tree at eye level rather than above. She could see the sunrise without the buildings blocking its early light. The baker noticed her immediately. He was a tall man with flour-dusted hands who had worked at the bakery for over a decade. He paused with his key in the back door lock and looked up at the cat. She looked back at him. Neither moved for several seconds. Then he unlocked the door and went inside. The cat remained on the roof. Steam began to rise from the bakery's ventilation pipes. They emerged from the roof about 10 feet from where the cat sat. The warm, moist air rose in the cool morning, forming small clouds that quickly dissipated. The cat's whiskers moved slightly in the gentle current of air that flowed across the roof. The morning deliveries began as usual. The milk and eggs arrived first. The delivery man looked up when the baker pointed out the cat. He nodded and continued with his work. The cat watched the crates being carried inside. Her tail moved once, a slow sweep across the metal roof that made no sound. The height of the shed roof placed the cat at the same level as the bakery's kitchen windows. Through them, she could see the activity inside, bakers moving between workstations, the flash of metal bowls and utensils, the steady kneading of dough on floured surfaces. The windows were closed, so the sounds were muffled. As the sun rose higher, it warmed the metal roof. The cat adjusted her position slightly, moving into the thin shadow cast by the bakery's chimney. The brick chimney was no longer used for its original purpose, but it still provided a windbreak and, at certain times of day, shade. The cat sat with her back almost touching the brick surface. A bird landed on the roof about 6 feet from the cat. It was a common sparrow, brown and quick-moving. It hopped along the edge of the roof, pecking occasionally at small debris carried there by the wind. The cat watched but made no movement toward it. The bird eventually flew away, apparently unconcerned by her presence. By mid-morning, the alley was filled with its usual activity. From her elevated position, the cat could see movements that would have been hidden from ground level. She could see people walking on Elm Street before they turned into the alley. She could see into the windows of the second floor of the building across the way. She could see the tops of delivery trucks as they backed into their loading spaces. The bakery chimney warmed in the sunlight. This warmth radiated outward, creating a comfortable microclimate on that section of the roof. The cat leaned slightly against the brick surface. Her eyes closed to narrow slits. Her ears remained alert, turning toward sounds even when her eyes were nearly closed. At lunchtime, several bakery workers came outside to eat. They sat on the steps and on the single bench against the wall. They talked quietly among themselves. Occasionally one would look up at the cat on the roof. Their expression suggested curiosity but not concern. No one attempted to climb up or to encourage her down. The afternoon brought a brief rain shower. The drops made small dark spots on the metal roof that spread and connected. The cat moved closer to the chimney, where the brick overhang provided some protection. Her fur darkened slightly where it got damp, but she didn't seek better shelter. When the rain stopped, she returned to her previous spot. From the roof, the cat could see the sun beginning its descent earlier than she could have from ground level. The light changed, becoming more golden as afternoon transitioned toward evening. Shadows lengthened across the alley. The temperature began its gradual decline. The cat remained in place, watching it all from her new vantage point. Chapter 5: The First Offering. The baker arrived earlier than usual on Tuesday morning. The sky was still dark, with only the faintest suggestion of light on the eastern horizon. Stars were visible above the buildings. Streetlights cast pools of yellow illumination on the empty sidewalks. The air was cool and still. No birds were singing yet. The cat was on the shed roof in the same spot she had occupied the day before. Her outline was barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. Only her eyes, reflecting the distant streetlight, revealed her presence. She watched as the baker approached the back door with his keys in hand. This morning, the baker carried something extra. In addition to his usual travel mug of coffee, he held a small white plate. On the plate was a piece of fish about the size of his thumb. It was plain, without seasonings or sauce. He had removed all the bones. The fish was room temperature, neither warm nor cold. After unlocking the door, the baker placed the plate on the flat surface of an empty crate that stood near the shed. The crate was about 4 feet tall, positioned where it would be visible from the roof but not in the way of deliveries. The baker didn't speak or make any gesture toward the cat. He simply placed the plate and went inside. Through the kitchen windows, lights came on one by one. Shadows moved as the baker began his morning routine. The scent of brewing coffee joined the permanent bakery smells of yeast and flour. The ventilation system started with a low hum. Steam began to rise from the pipes on the roof. The cat remained where she was. Her position didn't change, but her attention was now divided between her general observation of the alley and the specific location of the plate. Her nose moved slightly as the scent of fish reached her. Otherwise, she showed no reaction to the offering. Dawn arrived gradually. The sky lightened from black to deep blue to pale gray. Birds began to stir in the maple tree. A few early cars moved along Elm Street. The usual delivery van arrived with milk and eggs. The driver took note of the plate on the crate but didn't touch it. He completed his delivery and left. The morning progressed with its familiar pattern of arrivals and activities. More bakery staff arrived. Ovens heated. Dough was shaped. The first batches of bread went in to bake. The front of the shop was prepared for customers. Throughout all this, the plate remained untouched on the crate. The cat remained on the roof. Mid-morning sunlight finally reached the plate. It illuminated the piece of fish, which had begun to dry slightly around the edges. A fly landed briefly on it, then departed. A sparrow considered it from the edge of the roof but didn't descend to investigate further. The fish remained otherwise undisturbed. At precisely noon, the cat moved. Her movement was unhurried, as it had been when she first left her corner. She stood, stretched each leg individually, then walked to the edge of the shed roof. The edge closest to the crate was about 3 feet away from it. There was a clear line of sight between the 2 points. The cat sat at the edge of the roof and looked down at the plate. Her tail moved slowly from side to side. Her whiskers pointed forward. She made no sound. For nearly 10 minutes, she remained in this position, observing the offering from above. No one from the bakery came outside during this time. With the same deliberate pace that characterized all her movements, the cat descended from the roof. She didn't jump directly to the crate. Instead, she moved to where the shed was closest to the bakery wall. She stepped carefully onto a narrow ledge, then down onto a stacked pallet, and finally to the ground. Each step was precise. She approached the crate from the side opposite the bakery door. She walked a complete circle around the base of the crate. Her steps were silent on the concrete. Her attention never left the plate on top. When she completed the circle, she sat at the base of the crate and looked up. After several minutes of stillness, she rose onto her hind legs. Her front paws reached the edge of the crate top. With a single fluid movement, she lifted herself onto the surface. Now she stood directly before the plate. The fish was less than 6 inches from her nose. She lowered her head slightly to sniff it more carefully. The baker glanced out the kitchen window and saw the cat on the crate. He paused in his work but didn't approach the window or make any sudden movement. Other staff noticed his attention and looked out as well. Several of them stood quietly, watching. Their expressions were calm, mildly curious. The cat took a single bite of the fish. She chewed slowly and swallowed. Then she stepped back from the plate. Without taking any more, she turned and jumped down from the crate in a single easy movement. She walked across the alley to the space between the garbage bins where she had sat the day before. There she settled into her usual sitting position. The plate remained on the crate with most of the fish still on it. Throughout the afternoon, the cat stayed in her spot between the bins. She groomed her face and paws once, then returned to her characteristic stillness. Her eyes were often directed toward the crate, but she didn't approach it again. Chapter 6: The Wednesday Rain. Rain began shortly after midnight. It started as a light drizzle, barely enough to darken the concrete of the alley. By 3 in the morning, it had strengthened to a steady downpour. Water ran along the edges of the buildings and collected in small pools where the pavement was uneven. The sound of it filled the pre-dawn hours with a continuous white noise. When the baker arrived, the cat was not in any of her usual places. The shed roof was slick with water. The space between the garbage bins was partially flooded. The corner by the fence where she had first been seen was exposed to the full force of the rain. The baker looked for her briefly, then hurried inside to escape the downpour. Morning deliveries were quick affairs. Drivers ran from their vehicles to the shelter of the bakery's back door, trying to keep packages and themselves as dry as possible. Few words were exchanged. The plate that had held the fish was collected and taken inside. No new offering was left. The rain continued without pause. By mid-morning, the alley had taken on a different character. Colors were deeper, more saturated. Sounds were muffled by the constant patter of raindrops. Fewer people moved through the space. Those who did were hidden under umbrellas or hunched inside raincoats. The usual rhythm of the day was altered by the weather. A stack of wooden pallets leaned against the wall of the building opposite the bakery. They created a small sheltered space beneath their lowest level. The gap was perhaps 8 inches high and extended back about 3 feet. It was dry inside this space. The concrete floor was clean and slightly warmer than the rain-soaked surfaces elsewhere. The cat sat in this shelter. Only her outline was visible from outside, a darker shape against the shadows. Her position was the same as always, upright, alert but not tense. Her eyes reflected what little light penetrated her hiding place. She was completely dry, suggesting she had found this spot before the rain began in earnest. At lunchtime, one of the bakery workers came to the back door and looked around the alley. She was a middle-aged woman with glasses and curly hair tucked under a hairnet. She held an umbrella in one hand and a cardboard box in the other. She spotted the cat under the pallets and nodded as if confirming something to herself. The woman crossed the alley, stepping carefully around puddles. She set the box down about 6 feet from the pallets. Then she retreated to the bakery door and went back inside. The box remained where she had placed it, gradually darkening as the rain soaked into the cardboard. The cat watched from her shelter but didn't move. Inside the box was an old towel, folded to create a soft surface. The towel was dark blue with frayed edges. It smelled faintly of laundry detergent. As the rain continued, the outer layer of the box became soggy, but the towel inside remained mostly dry, protected by the multiple layers of cardboard. In the early afternoon, there was a brief lull in the rain. It didn't stop completely, but it lessened to a fine mist. During this time, the baker himself came outside. He carried a pair of scissors and several large plastic garbage bags. He approached the box, which was now quite wet. Working efficiently, the baker cut open the garbage bags to create plastic sheets. He arranged these over and around the box, creating a waterproof layer. He weighted the edges with small stones to keep the plastic from blowing away. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. The cat watched from her place under the pallets. The rain returned with renewed force just as the baker finished. He hurried back inside, the shoulders of his white uniform damp despite his quick work. The improved box now stood as a small shelter, black plastic gleaming with raindrops but effectively shedding water. The entrance remained open, facing away from the prevailing wind. Hours passed. The afternoon darkened early due to the heavy cloud cover. Street lights came on by 4 o'clock. Their glow reflected in the puddles throughout the alley. The usual end-of-day activities at the bakery were visible through steamed-up windows. Staff moved about, cleaning and preparing for the next day. By closing time, the rain had settled into a gentle but persistent pattern. It no longer drummed loudly on metal surfaces but fell in a constant soft patter. The temperature had dropped several degrees since morning. Breath was visible in the air. The wind had picked up slightly, creating small ripples in the puddles. Shortly after the last bakery worker left, the cat emerged from under the pallets. She moved carefully around the largest puddles, her paws placing precisely on the driest available spots. She approached the box that had been prepared for her. She circled it once, pausing to sniff at the plastic covering and the open entrance. With the same deliberate movements that characterized all her actions, she stepped into the box. Inside, she turned once in a circle, then settled onto the towel. From this position, she could see out into the alley while remaining completely sheltered from the rain. Her eyes remained open, watching the empty nighttime alley through the curtain of falling water. Chapter 7: The Neighboring Shops. The florist opened her shop at 8 o'clock each morning. She was a young woman with short dark hair who wore colorful aprons over her clothes. Her shop was 2 doors down from the bakery, with a narrow storefront but considerable depth. Deliveries of fresh flowers arrived 3 times a week. The scent of them drifted into the alley when the back door was open. The florist first noticed the cat on Thursday morning. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving puddles that gradually shrank as the day progressed. The cat was sitting on a low wall that separated the bakery's parking area from the neighboring property. She was grooming her front paw, lifting it to her mouth and drawing it over her ear. "Oh," the florist said, pausing with a bucket of trimmed stems in her hands. The cat stopped grooming and looked at her. Neither moved for several seconds. Then the florist continued to the compost bin where she emptied the bucket. The cat resumed grooming. Before going back inside, the florist looked at the cat again with a thoughtful expression. Later that morning, the florist spoke with the bakery staff when she came in to buy her daily coffee. They stood near the counter, voices low but audible. They compared observations, how long they had seen the cat, where she typically sat, her consistent lack of interest in human attention. The baker mentioned the single bite of fish. The florist nodded as if this confirmed something. The laundromat at the end of the block operated from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. The owner was an older man who had run the business for over 20 years. He spent most days sitting on a chair just inside the front window, reading newspapers and greeting regular customers. He had a clear view of the street and the entrance to the alley. On Thursday afternoon, the laundromat owner walked to the bakery for his usual midday sandwich. On his way, he paused at the alley entrance. The cat was visible, sitting now on the shed roof in what had become her regular spot. The man observed her for nearly a minute. When he continued to the bakery, he moved with the slow, careful steps of someone who didn't want to disturb a wild animal. Inside the bakery, he joined the conversation about the cat. He had seen her from a distance for several weeks, he said. Always alone, always watching. He had assumed she belonged to someone in one of the apartments above the shops. Now he wasn't so sure. The baker described the box they had provided during the rain. The laundromat owner nodded approvingly. The bookstore across the street had large windows that faced the alley. The store was a small independent business run by a couple in their 60s. They specialized in used books and local authors. Their shop cat, an elderly orange tabby, spent most days sleeping on a cushioned window seat. From this position, he had a clear view of the alley and the gray cat who had become its resident. By Friday morning, all the businesses on the block were aware of the cat behind the bakery. Staff mentioned her to each other in passing conversations. Some looked for her when they walked past the alley. Others brought small offerings, a tin of water, a few kibbles of cat food. These were placed near but not too close to her usual spots. The cat acknowledged these gestures only with brief glances. The hardware store next to the bakery employed 3 people, the owner and 2 part-time assistants. They sold tools, paint, and household repair items. Their back entrance opened directly into the alley, and they used this door frequently when receiving deliveries or helping customers carry large purchases to their vehicles. The hardware store owner had been watching the cat for as long as the baker had. He was a practical man who believed in live and let live. He made no attempt to interact with the cat but instructed his employees to be careful not to disturb her. When driving into the alley, they were to move slowly and check for her presence before backing up. The salon on the other side of the laundromat had the fewest direct sightings of the cat. Their back entrance was used rarely, mainly for trash disposal. But the stylists heard about her from other shop owners. During quiet periods between clients, they sometimes walked to the bakery for coffee, taking the alley route specifically to catch a glimpse of the now famous feline. By the weekend, the cat had become a recognized part of the small business community. She was discussed with the familiarity of a regular customer or a neighboring shopkeeper. People referred to her as the bakery cat, though she had no official connection to the establishment beyond proximity. Her independence was respected. Her privacy maintained. The manager of the small grocery store at the corner kept a log of cat sightings in the same notebook where he recorded daily temperatures and rainfall amounts. His entries were brief: time of day, location, activity, usually sitting or watching. He had been a biology teacher before retiring to retail. His observations were precise and without interpretation. Sunday was the quietest day in the alley. The bakery opened for limited morning hours. The bookstore operated from noon until 5. The hardware store, laundromat, and salon were closed completely. The florist opened only for prearranged pickups. The grocery kept Sunday hours, opening late and closing early. Vehicle traffic was minimal. It was on this quiet day that most of the shop owners found time to look more carefully for the cat. They glanced out windows or took slight detours past the alley. They noted her various positions, sometimes on the shed roof, sometimes between the bins, occasionally in the box that had been provided during the rain. She moved between these spots at her own pace, following patterns that made sense only to her. Chapter 8: The Gentle Understanding. Sunday evening was particularly still. Most businesses had been closed for hours. The streets were empty of traffic. Birds had settled for the night. The temperature was mild, neither warm nor cool. The air was clear. Stars were becoming visible one by one as the sky darkened from blue to purple to black. The baker worked late, preparing doughs that would rest overnight for Monday morning baking. He moved alone through the kitchen, his movements practiced and efficient. Occasionally he glanced out the window toward the alley. Each time, his eyes went to the corner where the cat had first appeared weeks ago. At 8:30, he turned out most of the lights, leaving only the small bulb above the prep table. He untied his apron and hung it on its hook by the door. He washed his hands one final time. Then he took something from the refrigerator, a small ceramic bowl with a lid. He placed it in the center of a clean towel and folded the corners over it. The back door opened quietly. The baker stepped out into the alley carrying his bundle. He wore his street clothes now, jeans and a buttoned shirt instead of his white uniform. His movements were unhurried. He set the bundle down on the step and unfolded the towel corners to reveal the bowl. The cat was sitting halfway between her original corner and the bakery door. This was a new position for her, neither fully in the shadows nor completely exposed. She sat upright in her characteristic pose, tail wrapped around her front paws. Her eyes reflected the security light above the door. The baker removed the lid from the bowl. Inside was water, clean and fresh. He placed the bowl on the concrete about 6 feet from where he stood and 4 feet from where the cat sat. Then he stepped back to the doorway. He didn't speak or make any gesture toward the cat. He simply waited, hands relaxed at his sides. For several minutes, neither moved. The only sounds were distant, a car on a far-off street, the hum of air conditioning units, the faint music from an open apartment window. The security light cast long shadows across the alley. The water in the bowl was perfectly still, reflecting the single light source like a mirror. The cat was the first to move. She stood, stretched in her unhurried way, and walked toward the bowl. Her steps were measured, neither hesitant nor rushed. When she reached the water, she paused and looked at the baker. Their eyes met directly for the first time. Neither looked away. After a moment that seemed longer than it was, the cat lowered her head and drank from the bowl. She didn't hurry. She took several small sips, then paused, then drank again. Throughout, the baker remained by the door, still and patient. When she had finished drinking, she sat beside the bowl and continued to look at him. The baker nodded once, as if something had been confirmed or agreed upon. A small smile touched the corners of his mouth. He didn't move toward the cat or attempt to touch her. He simply acknowledged her presence and her choice to approach the offering he had made. Eventually, the baker turned and went back inside. The door closed with a soft click. Lights went out one by one until the bakery was dark except for the security light above the door. The sound of his car starting came from the front of the building. Then that too faded away. The cat remained sitting beside the water bowl. As the night deepened, she moved to a spot halfway between the bowl and the door, closer to the bakery than she had ever sat before. There she settled into her familiar position, tail curled, eyes half closed but watchful. The water in the bowl gradually stilled until it once again perfectly reflected the light above. Stars completed their slow journey across the night sky. The moon rose and set. Dew formed on metal surfaces and on blades of grass growing between concrete cracks. The temperature dropped slightly then stabilized. Throughout these gradual changes, the cat remained in her new position, neither fully part of the bakery world nor separate from it. In the deepest part of the night, when even distant traffic had ceased, the cat closed her eyes completely. Her breathing became the slow, regular pattern of sleep. For the first time since she had appeared behind the bakery, she slept in the open rather than hidden in shadow. The security light illuminated her gray fur, making it silver in the darkness. Dawn arrived with its usual gradual transformation of the world. The sky lightened. Birds began to stir. The first delivery van turned into the alley. The cat opened her eyes and watched as Monday began. She didn't move from her spot as the baker's car pulled into its parking space. She remained there, calm and settled, as the back door opened and the day's first lights spilled out into the alley.